Well, today, one of our favorite topics, at least in
Yep.
my world.
It must be swim season. Is that because I notice when it starts to get a little bit darker, a little bit colder, it's the pools get at least for competitive swimmers, seems like it gets a little busier.
Yeah, and I'm swimming outside still,
Yep.
and I love it because the water feels warm when you get in.
Right, right.
Usually it
No, it's
feels
very
cold
true.
when you jump in, but now it's like because the air is so cold, you jump in, and it's so cold. I mean, it's terrible. It's like in the 60s, maybe 70s, and that's cold for us nowadays. So,
It's just enough, but it is a good time, right? Like the winter, especially as some people are transitioning to an off season.
yeah.
I know a lot of people that I work with, they really start to think about, well, what can I improve during the off season? It's sometimes harder to get in the biking and the running when it gets dark. So some people really do focus on, hey, like I want to improve my swimming in the off season.
Yeah.
And I know, John, it can be extremely frustrating for people.
Mhm.
It seems like the harder people try sometimes in swimming, rarely when people try harder do they not they don't get slower, but they don't necessarily get faster.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
today I thought we could maybe break down some of the mechanics of swimming from just a very basic principle, and then kind of talk about some of the ways we would, potentially coach people to potentially help them with
Yeah.
those things. So that being said, if it's okay with you, if you wouldn't mind breaking down some of the basic mechanics of swimming and swimming well.
Yeah, yeah. So I love that, and I love this topic. It's actually a lot of fun to talk about. I've always enjoyed swimming, and so that's been sort of my entry into triathlon. So it's a neat to be able to chat about a little bit more. And it's interesting. You talk about learning to swim and what have you. Swimming is a skill. Running
Yep.
is a skill. Biking is a skill. Swimming is just a little different because the fluid we're moving through is so much more thicker than air. Running is a skill, no doubt, but water is 800 times more dense than air, and so any movement in the water is a little bit more different than any movement on land. And so that's why a lot of times we talk about swimming being a heavy skill set, but both biking and running have skills that you need to have. But there probably is a lot of advantage to doing a lot more drills in swimming to learn some of that technique, because it pays off huge dividends. If you can improve your technique a little bit, you can actually improve your performance quite a bit. I always tell an anecdote when I get into this type of topic. I'll go to corporate challenge. You and I both enjoy corporate challenge, and be swimming against other people in the 50s or what have you, and you can always spot the swimmer who
Yes.
hasn't swum for a long time, but yet he jumps in the water. He's not in shape, or she, and the skill that they have allows them to still swim super fast without having the training behind it. And so it's always a fun thing to see. Well,
At least for a short time, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
until they run out of gas. John, can I just pause you just for a second? So can you explain to us? So I've heard this term 800 times, more dense than air, and I've heard people say 25 times more. So I know this is an area you study in your research. Can you explain what the 800 times more dense actually means?
So the density of the fluid is just that. It's how much stuff is packed into a certain volume. And water just has more stuff packed in a volume than air. So it's more dense. We think of fluid as not being compressible, and so it has. So if you pull a bucket of water out, it's got some weight to it.
Right.
Whereas if you hold a bucket of air, you're like, yeah, this is not really nothing at all. And so I guess those are just a couple of sort of comparisons. For the same volume, water is going to weigh so much more than the same volume of air. And so it works out to be 800 times more dense, roughly. And it does depend on what's in the water, even how the water is treated, does actually come into play. Salt water and all these things will play. But in general, it's more it's got more stuff in a particular volume. And so, just moving my hand through air is easy. If I move my hand through water, it's harder. It's harder because the water is more dense, and I have to move some of that water in order to move my hand through that fluid.
So I love that analogy you just gave. So in air, for example, moving your hand fast or slow through the air doesn't really, you don't really feel any difference, right?
Yeah, right.
When you move your hand with speed through water or slow through water, you notice a huge difference. And I
Yeah.
think that's a lot of what we're going to talk about with the mechanics of drag and
Mhm.
power. Is
No,
this an analogy you've used before?
no, perfect. Yeah, no, it is. And just like on a bike, we pay a lot of attention to be aerodynamic because we're moving through the fluid of air, but just at a really high velocity, and so it matters. Whereas in running, we're not running as fast, but we've all experienced running into a headwind, and
Right.
running into a headwind is harder. And especially if we run in some of our spring winds here in Vegas, 20-mile-per-hour wind, running into a 20-mile-per-hour wind is harder because that air is moving against you, just like if you're moving through water. So yeah, and so that pushing force on us from a fluid, and I actually refer to air as a fluid because it really is, but water is easier to sort of conceptualize as a fluid. That pushing against us is a function and part of how fast we're trying to move through the fluid. So if I move slowly through the fluid, there's not as much pushing. If I move faster, there's more pushing.
Right.
And in essence, and the equation for drag force on biking, 1/2 rho CDA V squared. 1/2 is just a constant. Rho is density of the fluid.
Right.
So either air or water. So 800, you're putting 800 in for one in the other. Those aren't the numbers, but that's the math behind it. CDA, those describe how well the fluid moves over you. There's actually two parameters. Those, in essence, they just describe how well the fluid moves over the object. And then V squared. And V is how fast the fluid is moving over the object. So this is the same equation that we use in drag force for cycling and for running, but more so, a lot of people are familiar with cycling. This is why you try to reduce your CDA. You try to wear a helmet or clothing or position to reduce or to make it easier for the fluid to move over the biker. And so that's just that collective CDA. This is the same equation in swimming, 1/2 rho CDA,
Okay.
V squared. And so moving the hand through the water slow, that's V. Moving the hand through the water fast, that's V squared. But now rho is 800 times bigger. And so that's why it's so much harder mathematically to do that in the water versus in air.
I love it. Okay, so what does this mean for swimming?
Okay, so I'm going to break it down to something real simple and say there's four forces acting on, I was going to say three and then call myself. There's four forces acting on the swimmer in swimming. Gravity trying to pull you down to the bottom of the pool. Buoyancy force pushing you up. So there are two vertical forces. Then you have drag resistance force, which is, just as it sounds, is the force of the water pushing against you to slow you down. And then you have a propulsion force, which actually I call drag propulsion force. And I'll explain that in just a second. So really we've got two horizontal forces. Buoyancy force does come back into play here, and we'll talk about later, especially when we get into the coaching part. But really, if we break it down to two forces in the horizontal direction the swimmer is moving, that's the resistance force and the propulsion force. They are both determined by the same equation, 1/2 rho CDA V squared. So I often turn to another sport at this point to explain this a little better, and that's rowing. I don't know if everyone's rowed a rowboat, but you've probably done stand-up paddleboarding or something like that, where you're moving a boat, something, through the water using a paddle. And what do you do how do you move yourself forward? You put the paddle in the water and you pull on it, and the paddle doesn't move through the water, your boat moves beyond the paddle. So
Right.
why doesn't the paddle move through the water? Well, because of drag force being placed on the paddle. And if you place your paddle in the water and you pull on it this way, you know that's harder to move that paddle through the water, and therefore the boat actually moves forward. So hopefully the paddle stays in one position. But if you turn your blade in a funny direction and you try to move the paddle through the water, you're not going anywhere because there's not as much drag resistant force. So the difference between those two situations is the area. Right. And that's part of that 1/2 rho CdA is area V squared. So area represents the area perpendicular to the fluid you're moving through or trying to move through. So when I'm swimming, I'm pushing like this. The hand represents the area that is part of that 1/2 rho CdA V squared. If I swim with a fist, I reduce that area. It's harder to swim because as I swim with a fist, I may actually move my hand through the water. But in swimming, what we are trying to do is put our hand in the water just like a paddle of a boat. And we're not trying to pull the hand through the water. We're trying to leave the hand there and move over the hand.
Right.
If we move our hands through the water, we're not moving forward. And so that's like if you swim with your fists, it's hard to move forward. Why? Because your propulsion force is reduced because the area of the hand is reduced. If you put a swim paddle on,
I want to pause you just for a second there.
Yeah.
You said that with your hand in a fist, it's harder to swim. It's less effort to swim.
Well, yeah, okay.
Right? But it's harder to move. It's harder to go fast. Right?
Yeah.
You do that. Like if you're tired, just go ahead and put a fist, right? You're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to go very fast, but it's easier. Right?
Yes, I love that. And so thanks for catching me. It's harder to swim the same velocity.
Exactly.
All right. Because you have to go really, really super fast. But it's easier to move my hand through the water. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Well, and why I wanted to bring that up is because a mistake, and I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, a mistake people make is when they get tired, they turn their hand so it's no longer perpendicular to the force that they're pushing.
That's exactly right.
And so that little slight turn in their hand actually makes it easier because it's physiologically easier.
Yep.
And this is what we see when people get tired, they turn their hand.
Yep.
And I get it. Like our brain has started to think, this is actually easier for me. And our body always wants to like try and find the easiest way to do something.
Yeah.
We want to lift. We try and we create different levers and we try and lift with the least amount of force. But in swimming, in this situation, we want to actually have the most amount of resistance or the most amount of force.
Yeah, no, I love it. And this is why technique is critical to swimming. And this is why you hear all these things about the importance of catching the water, the importance of high elbow, which I hate that term, but I like early vertical forearm, whatever. All these tips are trying to get to a point where your hand is just like the paddle of a boat. You're putting the paddle in the water and you're not moving the paddle through the water.
Right.
If you are moving the paddle through the water, same thing, you're not moving the boat forward because you're not going anywhere. So you put the paddle in the water in a particular way, you pull on it, and then the boat moves over it. You put your hand in the water a particular way, you pull on your hand in essence, and your body moves over your hand. So all the technique drills, catch up, fingertip drag, all the drills you're using in swimming is to learn how to get that hand in the right position in order that it doesn't move through the water. And you're right, when we get lazy, we do this type of, I'm moving that way, and my hand slips through the water. Or I pull my hand out early out of the water. I do something that interferes with my ability to push on the water. So yeah, and that's all drag propulsion force. And so you're learning there's two things you're learning with skill. One is you're learning how to generate a greater propulsion force, but then you're also learning how to reduce the resistance force. Those two things go hand in hand. So there's two forces acting on the person while swimming, and you're trying to it's an interplay of these two forces matching each other. And so the greater the resistance force, to swim a particular velocity, I need more propulsion force.
Right.
If I reduce my resistance force, I don't have to generate as much force to have that same velocity. And we know this in cycling too. We know if we sit up or upright on a bike, to bike the same speed, I got to generate a lot more power to match that speed versus being an arrow. Okay, that's a resistance force because of air resistance. Now we're talking drag resistance, which again, same equation, 1/2 rho CdAv squared. And the CdA is the body position in the water. And if you get the right body position, you're reducing that CdA during swimming. If you reduce that CdA, you're reducing the need to generate force, or you're using the same force and you're going to swim faster.
No, I love it. So, from the coaching side of things, this is exactly how I look at it, right? I really only think about two things, right? How much force you're able to generate and how much drag you have.
That's right.
And I find with when I'm really early working with swimmers, we were talking a little bit off the air, but I'm working with the UNLV Triathlon Club, and the kids there, and some of them are really brand new swimmers.
Mm-hmm.
And I find with them, if I can get their drag down first, a lot of them are strong,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I can really work on their drag, they significantly get faster,
Yep.
right? More so than if I was to like, you can only get so much power.
Mm-hmm.
If your legs are dropping and your elbows dropping and all these other things are happening where you're creating drag or you're spreading your legs really wide in the water,
Mm-hmm.
there's just really not much you can do as far as generating more force.
No, I love it. And in fact, most people will swim faster if you give them a pull buoy or put them in buoyancy shorts. And that is the number one thing that most people have is a problem of body position in that they're swimming through the water, but their legs are dropping or their legs are interfering, like you said, too big of a kick even. They're interfering with moving forward. So the CDA is going up because of body position. They're dragging their feet. But once you put them in a pull buoy or you put them in buoyancy shorts or wetsuit, any of those things will bring those legs up and you actually will swim faster because of a reduced resistance force.
Yeah. Yeah. So and you said it too. It is an interplay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you do something where you can create more force, but it adds more drag, you're losing,
Yeah.
right? So let's talk about what you said about the like over kicking, like
Yeah.
kicking too
Yeah.
much.
That's a problem.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's a perfect one, right? Because a lot of people that I've worked with,
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they have to kick harder.
Yeah. Right.
And in order to kick harder, especially if they're cyclists or runners, they bend their knees more.
Mm-hmm.
And they're actually, it's funny because I, I think they're actually creating more drag than they are propulsion
Yeah.
by,
Yeah.
by doing it. And it's actually hurting their speed. And so putting somebody once again with a pull buoy, it's not even always about the buoyancy. It's just like, hey, your legs are no longer bending, you're no longer kicking, causing more drag than propulsion.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this as well?
Oh no, totally. Especially even in endurance swimming. If we're talking about sprinting, and
For
this is the
sure.
problem when we dive into the literature on swimming, a lot of the swimming research is for Olympic type competitions. So 50s, 100, 200, 400, 1500 meter as well as the longest one. That's not triathlon. Well, yeah, the 15 is, but not, but 2.4 miles, 1.2 mile, what have you. We're not sprinting. We're not doing a 50. And so the technique for a 50 is different than what we need in triathlon. And we got to bike and run afterwards. And so, yes, I actually agree with you 100%. A lot of times the person's kick is getting in the way of their stroke. And now, if we do the mechanics, we can actually determine how much force is coming from the legs to propel the body forward. I've really talked about it from the hand perspective, and that's 90% of the force to move the person forward, maybe 10%. And I mean, I really mean maybe 10%. The kicking I see is more important, not for propulsion, but as you've mentioned, getting the body in the right position.
Right.
and getting the right rhythm between the lower body and the upper body to allow the upper body to generate the right propulsion force. And so kicking, I see as it's a rhythm issue. It's not a propulsion issue.
I totally agree. It's a rhythm slash body position,
Yep.
and don't get your feet in the way, right?
Mhm.
Like, I actually, this is just a personal anecdote for me. I used to really have a problem with this. I would just overkick, bend my knees
Yep.
way too much. And so every time I'd video myself, oh, same thing. And I just couldn't,
Mhm.
like, I couldn't not do it for some
Yep.
reason. So for about 6 months straight, I swam in fins.
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
And so what the fins did for me is they didn't allow me to overkick, because as soon as I overkick, you'd feel the
Mhm.
resistance,
Yep.
right? And so people are like, "Oh, that's cheating. You're swimming in fins all the time." Well, not if you're trying to develop something in your stroke,
Mhm.
especially if you're overkicking. Wearing fins can actually be very beneficial, uh,
Mhm.
and it can be like a fix for you. So now, like, I don't swim in fins. I hardly swim in fins at all anymore, but I don't have that same problem. I basically broke the habit by forcing myself to be in fins all the time. And yes, I know there are people in my swim group that thought I was cheating because I was going a little bit faster, but I
Good.
really, what I was trying to do is reduce my knee bend on
Mhm.
my kick, and get that better position.
So I love the fins, and I was actually going to bring that up because it's a tool, and it's a tool. Um, when I swam in college, we would use fins to do super speed type sets. That's
Wow.
what we were doing. We were trying to go as fast as possible with the fins. But for endurance athletes, the fins are more useful for figuring out the rhythm between the lower extremity and upper extremity. And I don't mean to oversell the rhythm part, but getting the lower body to coordinate with the upper body makes a lot of difference. And if those two things are separate from each other, you end up increasing your drag resistance force, and you end up not generating as much propulsion force, and so you're going to go slower. And so what I tell people is put the fins on and really pay attention to where and when you are kicking relative to your hands.
Right.
And by putting the fins on, you get that supersensory feeling of the feet. Without the fins, a lot of times we can't really figure it out. It's too hard. But you put the fins on, it's like you said, it does make you kick a little slower. You can pay a little more attention to it. Say, oh, maybe I'm really kicking when my hand is in this position, or maybe I need to kick a little bit differently, timing wise, to make this a little bit more coordinated. And so that's where the fins become a really good tool for learning that coordination between lower body and upper body.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? I mentioned that, like, people would give me a hard time about it. And I always thought of it, once again, it's a tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a tool, kind of like my bike trainer at home is a tool for me so I can ride when it's dark outside
Yep.
and or cold
Yep.
outside. It's just a tool. I'm not racing on that
Mm-hmm.
thing. Well, I do race, but like I'm not doing triathlon on that. Just like I would not do a triathlon with my fins on. They're not going to let me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a tool. It's same like paddles. They're a tool, bands, whatever the case may be. These are all just tools. And we can't, as triathletes, I don't think we should feel guilty about using these tools, even buoyancy shorts, right? It's just another tool that can help you if you know when and how to use them.
Yeah, no, I use all the tools, because it's a learning process. You do need to learn the skill of swimming, and you're learning two things. And you already said this. You're learning how to generate a better propulsion force, and you're learning how to reduce the resistance force. And I also encourage people to swim in buoyancy shorts, especially if their triathlons are almost always wetsuit,
Right.
because you do get in a different position in the buoyancy shorts, and you're not wasting your wetsuit. Because wetsuits aren't as durable for flip turns and all that kind of stuff, but buoyancy shorts are fine for that and put you in almost the same position as you would be for wetsuit, and you can make sure your stroke is appropriate for that body position. Because if you don't swim in a wetsuit and then you go and swim in a wetsuit, you're going to be in a totally different body position. Not totally, but most likely a very different body position. Your legs will be doing something a little bit differently. And now the swim is going to be harder because you're not used to swimming that way. Buoyancy shorts, we've actually done some work in this. Buoyancy shorts will be a good substitute for swimming in a wetsuit.
I totally agree. And you like you said, so many of the races we do are wetsuit races. That I actually was it was funny. We did a non-wetsuit race 2 weeks ago when I was in Waco. I hadn't worn my swim skin in years.
Hmm.
Because it's just like it was just the races I was doing. There everything was a wetsuit race.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I built into that race is I just lowered the amount of times I was in my buoyancy shorts.
Yeah.
And I probably only did it like 4 or 5 times in like the month before because I knew it wasn't going to be, it wasn't going to be a wetsuit race, or the thought was it probably wouldn't be.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is I felt like I swam the same position because I was just my arm position and my head position and my chest position, those were all like kind of almost hardwired
Yeah. Yeah.
at that point. Was I slower? Yeah, I was a little bit slower, but
Sure.
my
But you're trying to
position,
mimic the position in the buoyancy shorts, which is exactly the way to go. And when you find that right position, and I know this sounds odd, but it always feels like you're swimming downhill.
right.
It really is easier to swim a little bit faster. I know that sounds odd, but swim a little faster, you get your lower body up, reduce drag resistance force. You don't need as much force to actually swim the same or even to swim faster. So another tool, you mentioned hand paddles. I love hand paddles.
Yeah.
I love them so much. When I was younger, I got addicted to them. It's like I just want to use these all the time. It just really built up a lot of strength that way. But what I learned to get the most benefit out of the hand paddle wasn't necessarily even the pulling part, but it was the length of your stroke part. Now, the one rule I have when I tell people to use hand paddles is you can only attach them with one band on one finger. That's it. Don't put a wristband on holding onto the paddle, just one little band. And I know it's going to fall off. Not if your swim stroke is correct. If it does fall off, it's because you're usually trying to exit the hand early in your stroke because you're pulling up on it and the paddle wants to flip away at that point. So one band on a finger and swim paddles are good.
Well, I'm a big fan of swim paddles as well. My big thing is just small swim paddles.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think sometimes you see these people with these monster swim paddles. And once again, if I was training to do 50s,
Hmm.
where I need to generate a
Yeah. Yeah.
tremendous
Yeah.
amount
Yeah.
of force is really what I want.
Yeah.
That's why I want a big paddle.
Yeah.
But for us, when we're going long distance, we're trying to build up muscular endurance.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people like you want to paddle just about the same size as your hand, to be completely honest with you.
Hmm.
And that will give you that feeling, like you were saying, like the paddle feeling.
Hmm.
Not swim paddle, but sorry, the boat paddle
Yeah.
feeling.
That's right.
And where I can really see when I wear the paddles, the thinnest paddles, which is the thumb hole,
Hmm.
and I can feel my hand tilts
Yeah.
because there is no band to it. So if
Yeah.
your hand starts tilting near the end, you feel it
Yeah.
because the thing kind of almost comes off.
Hmm.
It really does reinforce the full stroke all the way through.
Yeah, it does. And you're right. Too big of a paddle. Leave that for, you know,
Kids.
people doing different types of swimming events. That's actually going to be really hard on the shoulders. In fact, I went and did some swimming on a device where you grabbed a immovable force platform in the water and you grabbed it and pulled over it. And in essence, trying to measure propulsion force that way. And as I've said, that's what you're trying to do is not move the hand. Now it does move through the water, okay? But you're trying not to move through the water, but it does. But on this device, there was 8 immovable objects that you swim, sort of like climbing a ladder.
Okay.
My shoulders were so sore after a
Ah,
day of testing because it was a different way of swimming, and my hand wasn't moving through the water the way that I would normally want it to move through, or that I was used to, and so it was a lot more force on my shoulders.
the other thing that I see people do, John, and this is like just deep, deep stuff, is they watch a lot of YouTube videos of other people swimming.
Yeah.
And what I would love you to do is watch videos of you swimming.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because people are like, oh, I think I'm doing that what that person does, and you're not.
Yeah.
Like you're doing what you do. There's a lot of very unique strokes out there.
Hmm.
And once again, I've had people come to me like, "Oh yeah, I think I'm doing this because I watched this video and I think I do that." I'm like, and you don't like.
Yeah. Right.
So back to like some just brief things on like the mechanics is looking at a video of yourself and just trying to imagine how much drag you have. I
Hmm.
love once again, I love the front on view because this is the same in cycling, right? We can actually figure out your drag by taking a picture of you right from the front,
Hmm.
like how much frontal area there is. It's
Hmm.
the same in swimming. If we look at your frontal area, if I can see your feet splaying out really big, or I can see your knees coming down into the
Yep.
water, I know that there's more drag there. And to me, like that's a really easy thing to see in a video. But yeah, look at yourself in videos.
No, that's a great coaching technique, and that's exactly what frontal area is. And so it's the view from the head-on view. So that's great that you do that, and you're spot on. It's like there's no sense in watching. Well, you can watch Katie Ledecky swim.
Right.
That's fantastic, but her stroke is unique to her and the speeds that she swims. I've always enjoyed watching distance swimmers like Sun Yang or what have you. And, you can pick up little things here and there, but watching elite swimmers swim, the speeds they're swimming at require a little different mechanics in terms of their body position is almost automatically fixed because they're swimming so fast. That's an odd sort of back and forth with that,
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah.
you're exactly right. And it's a fine line too, right?
Mhm.
It's I don't know.
Yeah, I love
I'm
watching.
yeah,
We had Lucy Charles swimming this last weekend, and that it's so great to watch her swim and others. But
but the
they are
speeds are
swimming.
they're so different, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you're a runner trying to run like one of
Hmm.
these top level 10,000-meter racers
Yeah.
you see in the World Championships or the Olympics, and you see how
Mhm.
beautiful they're running and how much kick they have and their stride length and their stride frequency. That's not you.
Right.
And I think in triathlon sometimes we get kind of lulled to sleep by thinking that we're just about as good as the pros.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you're not,
Yeah.
right? Your mechanics compared to them, your CDA compared to them, your whatever compared to them is it's a different ball game.
Yeah.
The one that I always see is, and we've talked about this before, like when they're trying to sell you a new front end, new cockpit for your bike, and like, oh, you're gonna lower your drag by 14 watts, and then they say at 45 kilometers an hour.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah. Right.
you're not going 27 miles an hour
Yeah.
for your average speed. You're going 20.
Yeah.
So, and then once again, that equation you brought up falls into place here. It's exponential.
That's right.
So maybe you're going to get 3 watts,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And is $2,000 worth 3 watts? And it
Yeah.
might not even work for you. So I think that this is really important in swimming as well, because everyone loves to watch the Olympic swimmers,
Hmm.
or even the top level triathlete swimmers.
Yeah.
But you are so far away from where they are,
Hmm.
for the most part. I mean, maybe we have some people listening here that are amazing swimmers, but you're so far away from where they are that you need to be thinking different than they are thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's this going back to where we started is swimming is such a skill sport. Running, biking, I'm not trying to disparage anything, but because of moving in the water is so different, the amount of time that Lucy Charles spent in the pool to learn how to swim the way she swims is an amount of time that none of us have to be able to do. We just don't. And so this is where I get it's like fingernails on chalkboard where people start telling, well, Lucy Charles does this. This is how you should do it.
Right.
You can't mimic Lucy Charles because one, she's built one particular way, and the number of hours she has to have learned how to do that swim stroke. I'll just give an easy example. People always say, well, do early vertical form. Okay, love it. It's a great tip. The best swimmers do that. But to do that, to learn how to do that is so hard. And I challenge people, hey, you know what? Just do it in front of a mirror. Go stand in front of a mirror and just look at the mirror and see if you can figure out how to do early vertical forehand without even trying to move in the water. And most people, they can't. Well, how, if you can't do it in air, you're most likely not going to do it in the water. And so I agree with you. You're going to find those very practical coaching tips that helps improve a swimmer without getting obsessed with some of the details that elite swimmers do.
And then once again, like you said, as far as like falling into the trap of, well, the elite swimmers are swimming 70,000 yards a week.
Yeah, that's right.
Good for them. But
Yeah,
guess what? You're not, because you have a job.
yeah,
You also want to swim, or you want to bike, you want to run. You got a family. Most of the people that I coach and that even for you that I work with, if you can get 10 to 12,000 yards a
yeah.
week,
That's great.
that's on the high end for age group triathletes, right?
Mhm.
And yes, I get it too. Like I can't tell you how many podcasts I've heard. Oh, well, just swim more. Easier said than done for most people in just in their life. Part of what we've talked about before is like just getting to the pool, right?
Yeah,
It could be a half-hour drive or 20-minute drive. You got to
that's right.
shower, you do this, you got to do that. It's at least a 2 hour, sometimes 2.5 hour investment
Yeah, right.
uh, just to get to the pool for a lot of people. And so I think that we need to think about that and be realistic about the times we can actually achieve in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say it, but like for me, like I'm okay swimming 35, 36, 37 in the 70.3. I've been faster, but when I was doing 15,000 yards a week, but I only got to like 32, 33.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? So for me, like the three or
yeah.
4 minutes that I'm going to gain and the hours it will take
Mm-hmm.
to get back to that, I can make, for me, I can make up way more on a bike and
Yeah.
running if I could just
Mhm.
take that time and put it into that.
No, you're spot on. The barriers to getting to a pool can sometimes be a determining factor in what you're going to do to become a better swimmer. That being said, if you have easy access to a pool, the number one thing I always tell people is frequency of swimming.
Exactly.
I would rather, and that sounds crazy, I know, I'd rather swim 7 days a week, 1,000 yards a day, than to swim one day a week, 7,000 yards a day. You're going to get so much more out of that frequency of swimming than you are out of a long session where you're going to break down, you're going to be tired, you're going to end up just doing, yards that really aren't helping you, and you're just logging distance for the sake of logging it. But the problem is a lot of people don't have easy access to a pool. I'm lucky. I got one 2 miles away from me, so I can go do a quick swim and very easy access. But not everybody has that.
Agreed. All right, John. Well, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah,
And we went a little longer than we thought we would, but we love talking about swimming. I know we don't talk about it enough, but I love talking about swimming. I love helping people swim.
yeah,
I know you do too. I've become a convert in the last 10 years that I actually enjoy swimming.
yeah, I love it. I
I
love
enjoy
it.
it on my terms, right? Like I enjoy working with paddles. I enjoy the buoyancy shorts. I enjoy a pull buoy. I enjoy I try and make it as enjoyable as possible for
At,
me, not a negative thing.
at the end of the day, that's the most. That is the important thing. And a lot of times triathletes don't like swimming, and I tell them you got to convince yourself that you enjoy it because that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
If we don't enjoy it, we're going to avoid it. So.
Awesome. All right, John. Well, hey, thanks. That was a great. That was a great chat. Hope you have a good weekend, and yeah, just enjoy the nice, cool weather that's coming.
Yeah, I love this, and we've got some people to cheer on this weekend, so that's going to be fun. And
Yep.
yeah, have a great weekend.
Okay. Thanks, John. Bye
All right,
bye.
listen, bye.